Welcome to the Coherence Project. I'm Dr. Tyler Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Amy Gunderson-Lewis.
This is a space for conversations in human potential,
where we explore how people evolve, how patterns reorganize, and what it looks like when you start living from a greater level of awareness.
Hi.
Hi.
I obviously know much of your story, but I don't think we've actually looked at the full progression of when you recognized truly the power of thought and what that really means. Like, what did that journey look like for you?
Wow. Yeah, it's come a long way. It started really with the wound. For me, that was a really intense theme of my life, how thoughts and me related and the impact in my life. Growing up just really young, I started to develop OCD. And so thoughts were really what felt like the perpetrator. It felt like the enemy. And I would have obsessive loops with thoughts and would try to run from my thoughts or control my thoughts or only have certain thoughts. And so it was a really intense time for me. But I love to go into this topic because it's so amazing to just observe now from the future, the entire progression and what that opened the doorway for. Because, in that time in my life, it was really intense. It was painful. It was traumatic. It was suffocating. But now I recognize it gave me a skill set to be able to self-observe. That was in, which we'll get to later, but a low energy example of observation, but I was paying attention. And later it cultivated a skill set that I have now. So that was kind of the beginning with thought. It was just being aware of them and actually being quite terrified of them.
How old were you when all this stuff was going on?
I was around 11, 12 when that started. Oftentimes that does start around hormonal ages for kids when that manifests. But shortly after, so maybe around age 16, someone introduced me to The Secret. And that's where the healing from the wound really started. It was like my doorway into, okay, hold on, maybe you have more power than you think. And so instead of getting stuck running from something, maybe you can choose. And so you've heard of The Secret, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Were you exposed to it early on?
Yes. So I found it whenever I was maybe like 19 or 20 when I first heard it. Yeah, it's really fascinating concept. It's like recognizing that the thoughts that we're experiencing determine our reality, so to speak. And I think the whole point of The Secret was it was helping people recognize that by paying attention to their thought patterns, those thought patterns lead to certain outcomes. And I can see why, and like going through that stage of your life, going through adolescence where thoughts are chaotic and you feel like you're more so like a victim to the thoughts that you're experiencing, like that leads to that's a really tough existence. But like, what was it about The Secret that really called to you and inspired you to make that shift?
Yeah. When I found out about The Secret, I actually watched the movie, so
Okay.
it wasn't the book.
Yeah.
And it felt like the most magical thing I had ever been exposed to. And some of it is just that, it's magical thinking. And that's something that I don't feel like I had access to because everything felt really dark. And so it was a big contrast to what I had experienced. But the idea that, okay, maybe I don't have to run from thoughts and I'm being attacked by them. Maybe I can choose the ones I want and that can change my life. I can start to manifest the things that I want. I can start to live the life that I want. I can start to have access to things I didn't know were possible. And so, using the skill set of being able to identify thoughts and really pay attention to them, I refocused it. It's like, okay, what do I want? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want to manifest? Still very me focused. And so this progresses over time, but this gave me a radical reorganization of my life. I remember just circumstantially what everything looked like around me. And the moment I shifted this and said, okay, enough of running, I'm going to pick something, my life really, really changed for the better. And so that was the very beginning. But there's a limitation to that because, maybe this wasn't the intention of the actual material, but the way that I took it was very self-focused. It was, okay, what do I want? What can I do? What can I manifest? What do I want life to look like? And although my life reorganized for the better, there came a point where I felt stuck. Like, okay, there's still some kind of control happening here. There's still some sense of there's something more.
Well, like speaking to control, initially going through this experience where the OCD, as you described it to me, as a way of controlling the thoughts, the sensations, everything that you're experiencing. You had certain patterns of behavior that you would do, and if you would do them, then it like created some like container of like safety, so to speak. Am I
Yes,
saying that right?
absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly what it was like.
Okay, so it was a way of like managing what it is that you didn't want to feel, because if you didn't do the certain compulsive behaviors that you were doing, then something bad was going to happen.
Yes.
And I just see how what you were saying in terms of the secret, it was like not about focusing on what you want less of the pain, less of the, uncertainty, but now it was a shift in focus on, okay, what is it that you do want? And now if you can practice those thoughts going toward what you do want versus what you're trying to get away from, like that is a significant shift. And that's really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. It was looking for safety. It was just a pure survival state. So, what can I do to feel safe? And then later it became, okay, well, what can I do to have a little bit more beyond that? And so there was more energy in it, really.
Okay, so then now like elevating that because you realized there was, okay, that was a crucial developmental shift and still incomplete, because I feel like the trap that's easy to get into was if I can just think hard enough, then I'm going to manifest anything, the amount of money, the partner, the
Yep.
whatever that is. If I can think about it hard enough, then that's what it's going to lead me to. I mean, obviously it created at some level of significant positive shift in your life, but like where does that point happen where you recognize that the thoughts, though you're directing them forward, thoughts don't necessarily create reality?
Right. And okay, so there was a few things that led to that. You know, really they were still coming from fear.
Okay.
Even though it was, I want these things, I definitely was aware that I didn't want those other things. And there was still a sense of, I have to control. So anytime control is present, there's going to be fear-based reality. It's fear. And so I remember, okay, so the next breakthrough in thought, the next shift of relationship and reorganization was like a quantum leap. And that's when I found David Hawkins' work. And that changed everything for me because it was, of course, synchronistically at the time when I was feeling stuck. And it's like, okay, I've been able to I got the vision board. I was able to get everything on it and manifest. And now I'm in a point in my life where it's like, is this all there is? And I can't manage this anymore because I was feeling the pain of me controlling and me being the one, that I'm focused on.
Yeah.
And so anyways, listening to David Hawkins' work, I downloaded this audiobook that was suggested for me. And from the very second it started to play, it was it felt like that frame of control, that container I was stuck in, it just instantly dissolved. I felt like all of a sudden I sensed that instead of my mind generating thoughts, I felt like I was the receiver of them. And he was talking about the scale of consciousness. So David Hawkins is all about calibrating through muscle testing the level of truth or consciousness or energy in all kinds of things, including emotions. And so this first book was talking about emotions, and it was talking about fear being at the low end of the scale. It only has so much energy in it. And the next would be anger, and the next would be courage. And he was walking his audience through the scale of consciousness. And then it just hit me. This is why reality feels stuck. If these thoughts, whether they're focused on what I want, if they're still based in control and fear, there's only so much potential in them. And that's when I recognized what if thoughts are a reflection of the energy, not the creator of an energetic experience? And that's when my whole world really turned around. It was huge. That paradigm shift was like two different experiences of life.
Did uh did anyone else enter your life at that time listening to David Hawkins
It was around the time
around
that
that
we
time
met.
that
Yes.
we connected? That was as you're talking about all of this stuff, I'm just thinking about and reflecting on how incredible, and when I say like magical of a time, I don't mean in terms of like, random events happening. And what I mean by that is there's the magic of getting to experience that point in life with you. It was like I was getting to experience life for the first time. There was so much synchronicity, so much revelation. I just remember hanging out with you and talking. The audio that we were listening to is called "The Highest Level of Enlightenment," but it obviously reflected to his book "Power versus Force." And David being an MD, PhD, someone who had obviously explored health and also was more fascinated through his own life experiences with the understanding like consciousness and what shapes that. Like this brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man created this incredibly powerful and simple tool to like realize like, okay, what is the energy shaping things? I'm just like, as you're talking about this, like I was also going through a significant shift in my own life because I recognize in my life, I was experiencing a lot of challenges with anxiety and racing thoughts. Like I felt so crazy in my head because I was experiencing all these like looping thoughts. I didn't realize how anxious of a person I was, but there was so much control. I felt so like rigid in how I was navigating life, and I was fighting so hard to like prove myself or to be a certain way, but it became to this, it was painful. It's a really painful way of being, and I didn't realize how much pain I was in at that time in my life. And this is like going through college and an early chiropractic school, like the first half of it until really like this moment in life. But I had this like really, you know, maladaptive coping strategy, so to speak, where my go-to was THC. I mean, I smoked a lot of weed in order to like dampen this experience of feeling so much anxiety. It was my coping strategy of feeling so overwhelmed. And I didn't know where that overwhelm was coming from, but at least whenever I had this coping strategy, it allowed me to like, kind of escape that for a moment and feel like I'm somewhat functional. And then I realized in one, connecting with you, getting to explore this material from, for example, like David Hawkins, but also starting network spinal care. Like there was a huge, powerful shift in just how my nervous system felt and how I perceived and received life and experience. Therefore, my thought was different. It was like I was finally getting to experience a different type of thought rather than this like looping internal self-conscious anxious style of thinking. It was like, oh my God, there's a world around me and I'm seeing it for the first time, and like there you are. And it was just the most magical, beautiful time in life together. Just like getting so emotional as you were sharing all of that stuff, because that was one of the most magical points
I know.
in life.
I think about that time and it's like, okay, where both of us were in our lives
Mhm.
and how we were just so primed and ready for a huge shift,
Yeah.
an awakening, an opening. And then, it's funny as you're describing yourself, it's like the control and the rigidity and the anxiousness. And here I am with the control and the rigidity and the anxious. Like, no wonder we came together. And
Yeah.
we talked about this in Family Constellation. It's like systems come together because there's so much potential there to heal.
Right.
And there's things that mirror each other. And, I feel like from the very moment that we linked up, we were determined to express the healing part of it, not the wound. And so it was such a beautiful self observational time, but also so magical.
Yeah.
And it all, again, it started with no longer being afraid of feelings.
Mhm.
And that's where for me, it really started to shift going from, okay, there's these thoughts that I'm trying to get away from because I feel like they're going to create this awful reality and I need safety. Then there's these thoughts I want to run to because they're going to give me a better reality, to, okay, what if life isn't attacking me? What if this is just energy wanting to be experienced? And that was like, that's a novel concept.
Huge.
And so you're right. It's like getting under network care and helping my nervous system be able to actually experience what it's
Mhm.
experiencing was powerful. So I can see how, those coping strategies were not wrong. They were necessary. I didn't have the infrastructure to actually experience my experience. But once I did, oh my gosh, I remember the very first entrainment that I had that we went to
Mm.
together, and walking outside and how the lights just came on and it was like, whoa, I'm feeling life. So instead of thinking life, I'm feeling life. Like I had that revelation. And so back to David Hawkins' work and listening to that audiobook with you, The Highest Level of Enlightenment, and really recognizing like, okay, information's attracted to certain energy states. So these emotions that I'm not allowing myself to feel, that I'm running from, it's literally creating the opposite effect in my life. Now all of a sudden, these emotions aren't shifting, changing, and evolving naturally into the next higher resonance. So I'm getting all these thoughts that are fear-based. And it was just like, what's happening? And so being able to just experience energy, experience emotion without tying it to a story was life changing.
That's like when we judge the pain, when we judge it, we're running from it. That's what I was doing, and that's what you described you're doing. It's like that it doesn't go away. It's that we're just running a different direction, but it's still there. It's like that doesn't change until you actually acknowledge, become aware that that's what's going on, acknowledge and accept that that's how it's playing out. But because it's just an energy, it's just an energy that's
Yeah.
present, and based on that energy, of course, you're going to have that thought, that emotion, that
Yeah.
experience.
And that's something I want to clarify because, like, when we often say, okay, I'm running away from pain, it creates more pain. It's not that you need to sit there in these obsessive loops that are painful. It's the actual sensation, it's
Yeah.
the energy. So it's almost like discomfort, I would say, more so than pain. I think we create our own painful reality by not being with discomfort.
Yeah.
And, that's again what network care and David Hawkins' work taught me.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is just a level of energy vibrating. This is just an experience. This is just a resonance. And as you allow yourself to open up to that and have that experience, it lifts. And then it lifts again. And then it keeps lifting. And what do you know? New thoughts come in, inspiration comes in. All of a sudden, I'm not the one who has to do everything. I'm not the one who has to control. I'm not the one who has to manifest, because if I don't, then my life is going to be awful, or I'm going to be, in some kind of prison.
Yeah.
It's like now all of a sudden I trust life. Now all of a sudden I recognize that life isn't happening to me, not even for me. It's happening through me, and it's according to what energy state I'm experiencing. And that is so freaking liberating.
It is, because, for example, like I was trying to study the mind at the level of the mind. I was trying to understand how the mind works. I was studying psychology. I was studying the impact of the nervous system, different parts of the brain, and how they create and organize and facilitate certain experiences of our reality. And it's like I'm just studying and studying and studying, and I'm trying to make sense and understand what's going on. The most liberating aspect of the simplicity of what the scale of consciousness and power versus force illustrates is that, okay, if how our nervous system is assimilating information is based on the amount of available energy, the scale is talking about it like lower levels of energy, like, for example, shame, apathy, fear are very low levels of available energy. Then your ability to navigate and respond to life circumstances is going to be very limited, and you're going to think thoughts and have physical reactions that resonate with that. As it moves up the scale to something like anger or desire, now it's like there's a part of you that's actually wanting to move toward or create some type of change. But there's this tipping point that happens at the level of acceptance, or really courage, which is really, what we're even talking about, the capacity to really focus on something.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, there's so much I want to say about this.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is where it's like, and you can tell just my energy around it. It's like,
yeah.
this is where life began for me.
Yes.
And, before I was existing, and here's where living started to happen. And so as you're talking about it, of course, because what I wanted to reflect is, he sets this scale that is exponential each calibration that you go up from 0, well, 1 to 1,000. Okay. So 1,000 is essentially the highest level of energy or consciousness that the human body can sustain, can facilitate. Okay. So anything 200 and above is what's called life sustaining. And so, he used these different dialogues around it. It's life sustaining, or, 1,000 would be ultimate truth. And then 1 would be ultimate falsehood and life depleting. Anything 199 and below is life depleting. And so, that alone, having that compass is such a gift that he gave humanity, because, before, we had the opportunity of having network care. We had nervous systems that could feel and synthesize information and experience energy. And there's some people that it's really hard to experience that. So they don't have that compass of their body sense. So he provided them with the ability to recognize truth from falsehood, the level of energy in different things, whether it's emotions. And that's what I want to say next. He calibrated so many different things, like books. You talk about, you studied in literature the mind, and you wanted to understand psychology. And the question that came up for me is, well, what was the level of consciousness? What was the level of energy that these databases were created out of? Because it's not that the field of psychology or the field of, any of that is wrong or bad. It's just recognizing all of these databases of information exist at different energy levels, different levels of truth. What resonated with me back when I was studying, practicing The Secret, is a different level of energy, a different level on the scale than David Hawkins' work or anything else I've found, beyond that. And so I think that's a really important aspect that we're talking about here.
What caught me and fascinated me about the work is, one of the first things he says was, the greatest dilemma that mankind faces is its inability to discern truth from falsehood.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when the mind is trying to understand itself. The thoughts that we're experiencing, how we're processing and assimilating information, how we're justifying the perspective. If at the level of our mind and our thoughts and our beliefs, we don't recognize that it's coming from a certain lens, then that's what the mind does. It gets stuck on its own justification loop. And so that's how, you can have all this literature studying and reflecting and saying different things, all claiming to be truth. But the big question is, and what is actually real? Because that's what I was realizing in my own experiences, is that my mind was looping at a certain level of energy that was perpetuating cycles of shame and fear and anxiety and all of these things. And I was creating all these stories that reinforced that. And I thought that the story and the reason was why I was feeling it. But when we connected, and all of a sudden we're experiencing this, and we're going through the network care and learning about this new perspective, is like, my God. It's not the thought, it's just the energy that's creating these thoughts. It's not actually real. If I were to actually look at the amount of energy in these thoughts, it's low.
Yeah.
It's survival, it's protective, it's reactive, not productive.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said, because you said, okay, I would have these experiences and loops of shame and guilt, and then I would have thoughts that perpetuated that experience. I have heard emotions and thoughts talked about a lot of different ways from a lot of different people. And there's a lot of different beliefs that, okay, emotion creates thought, thought creates emotion. And ultimately, I think that they're both just existing at a level of resonance.
Yes.
And so, it was for the example of, okay, I had these thoughts that reinforced shame. I mean, really, that's you not wanting to experience shame. So then you go into your mind. And that's really what happens the majority of the time. It's not that your thoughts are creating an emotion. It's that you're trying to get away from the experience of an energy that wants to be in motion by going into your mind and then linking it up to that experience, and then you have it over and over again, not as a punishment but as an opportunity to come back to just experiencing the energy in its raw form.
It's like if I'm tuned into the country music station, I shouldn't be surprised if they're singing about cowboy boots and beer and driving trucks on backcountry roads. I'm like tuned into that station. Of course, that's the music that is going to play.
Yeah, so Donnie Epstein, like his contribution here was invaluable because David Hawkins talking about the scale of consciousness and the different level of energy and a lot of different things and going from 0 to 1,000. Well, Donnie made it really simple when he started talking about energy states. There's energy low, neutral, and poor, which is the life depleting side. Then there's energy high, neutral, and rich, which is the life sustaining side, the evolutionary side, the thriving side, the growth side. And he gave a map about how to identify the energy that's present. So the energy in a thought. Okay, is this thought something that contributes to others, helps you connect more, be more, serve more, or is this thought one of protection and survival and taking? And so you can start to identify your energy state through the thoughts. And same thing, you bring that back to the scale. What emotion is present or not present, and being able to self-reflect and just identify what station am I tuned into. And so there's so many amazing people who created a lot of different maps that overlap and they say the same thing, but from a lot of different perspectives. But I think the gift to humanity was the ability for people to recognize what station they're tuned into.
And then to be able to choose
something
is
else.
this what I want to respond from? And that was what really was, it's still powerful in my life because I can still have, really crappy thoughts and and like have that experience. But am I choosing to respond or to create or to engage with the space around me or even myself from that level of energy? Or do I just realize, oh, wow, I'm just playing that low energy station. How can I shift into something different?
Yeah. Okay. So a tool that people use sometimes, mantras or affirmations.
Okay.
So let's go with affirmations. How come affirmations work for some people and don't work for others? What's really going on with those?
What you were saying earlier, there's a different layers to this. One of those is if you're saying something to get out of an experience. Say that I'm experiencing being abandoned or I'm rejected or I'm worthless. I'm having that experience. Well, then all of a sudden I was like, I'm worthy, I'm loved, I'm all these things. If saying that at least allows me to see that there's a differential between my experience and a new possibility. But at the same time, if there's something going on in my own nervous system, whether it's like a conditioned belief, a repeated pattern, it's like I also have to be able to recognize the other side of that actually may still be caught in those cycles. I mean, I was thinking about that just from a physiological level. So again, an affirmation is more so like my mind is wanting to say something, but if viscerally my body has learned that I need to be small or protect in order to stay safe, now it's like I'm trying to override my own protection physiology.
Exactly. And it actually becomes a stressor.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to get into because it's really about if you say something to yourself that doesn't match how you identify, then there's a dissonance.
Yes.
And it creates a stressor because your nervous system's always looking to reinforce its identity and what it knows to be true. And so, you're at war with yourself. And that's what was happening to me early on with OCD and then getting into like, okay, well, let's pick other thoughts. And there was this friction happening because I would repeat things over and over again, but my body says that's not true.
Yeah.
And my nervous system says that's not true. And now all of a sudden it's creating stress in my actual physiology. And so, where affirmations are really powerful is when we've had the visceral experience, when we've had access, and then it's to remind us of
Yes.
something that we know to be true. Yes, maybe that's not our entire programming, but at least we have access to it. We were teaching a class over the weekend. We were doing a demo class with all of our practice members, showing them care and what happens in your body and in your life. And in the beginning, we always ask the same question to people because it's fascinating to hear people's answers. But what's health to you? And someone answered coherence. Obviously, we love that word. But the minute she said it, it was like, okay, awesome. Well, she followed it up with, what do you do when your thoughts don't match what your body's feeling? And it's like, okay, well, that's a lack of coherence. And what this is it's just another sign that our set identity in our nervous system, our beliefs are expressing at a different level of energy than the thoughts we're trying to force. And so it's not bad. It's just recognizing that there's an incoherence happening. And so, very baseline, it's like, how can we just be with the energy that's present instead of making it wrong, instead of wanting to change it or making it bad? How can we just be with the experience and watch life heal before us? Because that's the most magical thing is every single time when you are with an experience in its essence as it is without wanting to change it and without getting your mind involved and having stories, it shifts on
Yes.
its own for the better. It rises. And it's like all of these different maps and models tell us that. And, it's just that survival part of our brain that thinks like, okay, it works for everyone else, but will it work for me? I don't know. I can't trust it. I got to control. I need safety. And so it's like, that's the aspect of us that is asking to evolve.
Because when we look at that, there's wisdom there. Like as you're talking about this example and affirmation, it's really helpful when you have been able to acknowledge both sides of the spectrum. I mean, I just had this visual of like I'm walking around in downtown Dallas, and I'm like, I'm on the beach, I'm on the beach, I'm on the beach. I see the waves. It's like, okay, there's dissonance because clearly you're in downtown Dallas. You're not on the beach. You're not in Hawaii. You're not like swimming with the turtles. You're like right there.
Well, and then you don't trust yourself. And
Yes.
and that's something that I think is really important because if we're telling ourselves quote unquote lies because our body knows that that's not the truth, then all of a sudden we lose trust in ourselves. And then, the follow-up question, I forget how it came about in that class was, how do I know what I'm feeling? How
Mhm.
do I know if this is coming from fear or if it's something that I'm receiving? And it's like, well, that's a compass that got confused because we're feeding it these things that our nervous system says that's not reality. And so it doesn't just go one way. We have to be in coherence. And so we have to be able to experience energy and discomfort so that our physiology can actually experience life in its pure form. And then we will be able to tell this like we'll have the ability to sense truth from falsehood.
So if you're in Dallas and you want to go to the beach, you can recognize, hey, I'm in Dallas and you want to go to the beach. Great. You have a trajectory. There's something aspirational that now you can begin to align your resources.
Right.
You know where you're at. You know where you want to go. And now you have to start getting the ticket together, buying the ticket, getting the hotel, getting all the things that you're going to need there, knowing how to drive from where you're at to the airport to fly you to the beach. You can start actually assimilating the resources to help you actually get there. And also the wisdom of what it actually took in order to lead you being in Dallas in the first place, as well as being able to actually get to the beach. And it's
Right.
what I learned through my own experiences and walking those really painful loops and spending so much time trying to get out of those or coping with them when I could actually be with, to be aware of, acknowledge, and accept where I was, how I got there, and what that energy led to. All of a sudden, as I experienced it again, because of course we're going to experience painful sensations. It's a part of life. Sometimes our state drops. We're under stress. We're not adapting. We're going to experience these painful thoughts loops all again. But now I'm not afraid of it. Once you face your personal hell and you're able to navigate through that and build a pathway out of it, you're not afraid of it because you can walk that path over and over and over again and it no longer limits you.
And choice is different than control. Like,
Yes.
David Hawkins talks about power and force.
Yes.
Control and force comes from when we're trying to avoid something. So then we're seeking something out of survival. And that's really what happens versus when we're centered in our power. We're no longer judging something as good, bad, right, or wrong. We're just in an acceptance as things are. And when we're in that state, that's when we actually get to choose. So like thoughts, on the topic of thoughts, like we're talking about, it's no longer about trying to like shield from bad thoughts and grab onto good thoughts. Now we can just watch them flow by and just pick the ones that serve in the moment. And that's true empowerment. That's actual choice and that's actual power.
So to explore a couple different perspectives, because for example, another influential person in my life early in studying the mind and studying thought was Dr. Joe Dispenza. Was was he on The Secret, or did I just hear? No, What the Believe
No,
Do You Know?
yeah,
There you go. That's where
yeah.
I first got connected with him. What the Believe Do You
Well,
Know?
we saw him at that Hay House seminar
Yeah,
for
we
the
saw him at
first
the
time. Yeah.
seminar, and a lot of his focus was about how your thoughts do create reality. Your thoughts create emotion. Your thoughts create physiology. And so if you can master your thought, then you can change reality. And that was, I feel like, was really helpful. And then to explore another really influential person, there was Bruce Lipton, who looked at like belief systems and ingrained habits of thoughts and beliefs and how that actually changes and wires your physiology and even your genetic expression. So you build a body based on like even the thoughts and emotions that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
And I still think that goes back to that is a powerful concept. And, if we are, again, forcing thoughts that our body doesn't believe, that doesn't have an actual physiological experience of, then it's just like those affirmations that there's dissonance. But if we've had an experience before, we know how our body, what posture we go into when we're in it, we know the feeling, we know the experience, then we can access it again and again. So yes, choosing those thoughts helps you anchor to that experience over and over and over again. And of course, that will shift your entire expression. Bruce Lipton talks about it, how your genetic expression is shaped by how you perceive your environment. And so, yeah, your thoughts have a play in that, but there's some nuance to that.
So in perception, so that's a key word with all of this as well, perception. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is based on perception. Whatever we are perceiving, we're going to create some type of response. So whatever our nervous system is perceiving in terms of the information that's going on around it, it's going to create a certain physiology, a certain biochemistry, a certain emotion, a certain thought, a certain reflection. And a lot of times I feel like there's a focus on controlling or manipulating the symptom that's showing up. But if we recognize that really the symptom is just based on a perception, it was a response based on a perception, then all of a sudden it's not about managing the symptom, though that can be really important at a certain stage. It's about how can you help shift the perception.
Yeah.
And I feel like what was really first interesting, but where I challenge a bit the idea, and no one really knows this stuff. I think, everybody's studying thoughts and consciousness, and it's like this is something that we're really getting to explore more of in our modern society. There's been philosophy for, thousands of years, and now we have the science to start backing up some of this stuff, but I still see that we have a long way to go. And like Joe says that our thoughts create reality, and where I challenge that a bit is I say that our energy predates or is a precursor to the type of thought that we're going to experience.
Totally, because we've talked about this before, but at different energy states, different thoughts even become available.
Yes.
You wouldn't even be able to think of the thought of an energy state beyond where you're at. And so you're right. It's the energy that precedes that. I was just thinking about something that Donnie says all the time, and I think it really makes it simple for people that are just starting to observe this and starting to choose which thoughts they want to entertain and what they want to reinforce. Is the thought you're having a thought that you'd want everyone else in the room to hear? Because that lets us know, okay, is this one of judgment? Is it one of separation? Is it one that creates what he calls the win-win-win, where I win, you win, and everyone we know wins? And so just starting with a basic compass. It's like,
Right.
okay, is this thought one that I would be okay with everybody knowing that I'm having? And also recognizing thoughts aren't real. It's just information that assembled, lined up, because that's the energy that's present. So if a thought comes in and you're like, wow, this one sucks, You can just take a deep breath and wait. You can do something that raises your energy state and then say what thoughts are available to me. Like, it really is that simple.
That's huge, saying that thoughts aren't real. And it's more, I think about it in terms of it's more as though our mind is a receiver of thought rather than the creator of it. And like I was saying earlier, depending on what station that we're tuned into, we're going to play those thoughts. And this was really big for me because having so much of my life where I was fighting the thought and coping and not being able to adapt to all of those thoughts, to realizing, oh, wow, if I can help shift my state, then I get to experience a different reality, different responses, different engagement, different impact. That was huge, radically life changing. On one aspect, there is the like self aware aspect of that, but also there's the visceral part of that as well. Because we were saying earlier, is like if our bodies, like, I went through all sorts of experiences in my own life, stress, different types of trauma, whether it's physical or, rapid life changes happening. There was chemical stresses and traumas that I went through as well. And like my body learned how to survive. And there's this visceral part of thought as well. I think about like, okay, if my stomach growls and my blood sugar drops, like I have a thought, oh, I'm hungry. Or, if certain stress hormone levels are dropping and I get, really heavy, I think a thought, I'm tired. Our body can even create sensations that then the mind, in order to like understand that sensation, creates as a thought.
Yeah, it links a story to that experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I feel like on so many levels, even at a very visceral level, things like network spinal care recognize that, okay, if our physiology is running in a certain level of tension with a certain capacity and bandwidth, that's even going to shape the lens through which we're viewing things. Candace Pert and her book,
Molecules of emotion.
Molecules of Emotion. I was like, Biology of Emotion. No, that's Bruce getting in there. But yeah, Molecules of Emotion. She talks about how the spinal cord is really the organ of emotion. And then I think about like the radio receiver. As you turn the dial, it changes tension on this filament in the radio. Therefore, you're tuning into a different station. And radio waves it's light energy carrying information. And then the radio receives that and it plays that music. And this was so empowering because it's like you can't fight thought at the level of consciousness that's creating the thought. There's been quotes about that, but you can't do it. Then all of a sudden you recognize, okay, one, there's a self-awareness of recognizing thought has a certain level of energy that's present. Okay, is this how I want to respond? What can I do to begin to shift my state to an energy that is a response that I feel like will create a positive impact on others? That is a thought that I'm happy for the room around me to be able to hear, and that's going to be able to create a positive impact and uplift others. There's a level of accountability and responsibility. There's even a maturation that happens with that, because at first it's like, whoa, you realize like, if things have been unconscious for a long time, they've been able to run loose and do whatever they're doing. But all of a sudden you become aware of that, and that is kind of that was a really interesting experience. But that's where we also have to invite grace,
Right.
and be able to surrender judgment and just recognize like, hey, that's just an energy creating these things.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's judgment. So the moment we decide that we're no longer going to judge life or judge thoughts or judge sensations, that's when we're truly free to choose.
Yes.
And that's what it requires. And it's really two different levels of mind. There's one part of mind that judges and separates good, bad, right from wrong. It's our conditioned mind, the survival part of us. And then there's the part that chooses, the one that is open to receive. And which one are you identifying with? Which one are you choosing to utilize to organize your life? And that really matters. But the liberation of not judging life is beyond words. It's funny, beyond words. But ultimately, to not have to be afraid of certain thoughts or judge certain thoughts, and just be able to recognize it's just energy and the next one will come. That's, for me, was when I felt like I could truly live life.
And perhaps this is a topic for another day, but just to say like where thoughts come from. If we really are a receiver of thought
Where does that come
versus the creator of thought, it's like thought, we're pulling thought from different places. I was even thinking about, okay, one, our physiology creates sensations and thoughts, but also I feel like there is a cultural way that thought works. It's like, okay, well, if I'm operating based on the apps, like there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is all about looking at the context of life experience, and it really wants to simplify certain things. So, for example, growing up, this is what I learned a father was and a mother was. This is what I learned what a professional was, or this is what I learned what a son was. It's like we have this context that's created, and based on my experiences, it's like I downloaded certain apps to whenever I see a father, or if I am a father, then I start playing out these certain apps and patterns and ways of thinking and responding.
Unconscious belief systems.
Unconscious belief systems,
Yeah.
exactly. So now later in life as an adult, it's like I can start repeating the pattern. Well, I learned at an early age that this is what a husband is. Now all of a sudden I show up in marriage and I'm playing out unconsciously the same thought patterns and behaviors and emotions
Right.
that my brain associated. Well, that's what a husband is supposed to be. And it's like I'm allowing that role or the culture of however I was conditioned to now drive those thoughts. And then we have the ability to become self-aware and be like, oh my God, am I really responding, reacting in this way? Is it the role that's defining my thoughts, or now do I have the opportunity to recontextualize my experience of what a husband really is? And not just as a husband, but again, as a father, as a doctor, as a whatever that role might be, the freedom you were talking about that comes with self-awareness, recognizing that there's an energy behind a thought, and then having the ability to choose, is this the energy that I want to perpetuate and propagate in my life? Now we have the ability to choose other. I feel like that's where the most profound, even like mental, emotional, spiritual level of healing can really happen, because we can realize our power to be conscious creators in our life and use our mind not as a what is creating reality, but a powerful tool to be able to manifest a reality that's able to organize a higher level of life.
Exactly. Like from gift to wound. It's like being at odds with our mind. And, I hear a lot of people talk about the monkey mind and how my mind's always, whatever, like they're a victim to it
Yeah.
compared to, well, what it really shines at is focusing.
Yes.
And you get to choose what it focuses on.
Yes.
And it all comes back to how much energy is available.
Yep.
And so, yeah, what an awesome conversation. Thanks for
Absolutely.
exploring this.
Absolutely. Allow the mind, it's most when it's in its most enriched space, it is a humble servant to
Soul.
soul.